We have a loaded show for you guys today as well. No opening. The opening is the SEC schedule release. It was just announced, the rundown. Do we want to go week by week? Let's do it. I'm going to give you the premier matchups in every single week of next year's college football SEC slate. Week 1, some big ones, boys. Out-of-conference matchups. Texas goes on the road to Ohio State. LSU goes on the road to Clemson. 2 massive brand football games right there to kick off the college football season.
Yeah, I like that. I think that the Syracuse matchup with Tennessee is interesting. You know, Syracuse finishing their season strong, Tennessee having high hopes going into next year, make your first college football playoff. Then you got to open the year with an ACC team that seems like they're trending in the right way, but Tennessee gets Nico back as well. A lot of interesting things going into week 1 matchup.
That's the type of week 1 matchup where you come in and you have it circled for so many days. Is this the best week 1 matchup ever? Like, the fact that you have those types of brands, those types of games, and it's not just brand names. Like Clemson versus LSU is going to be a very good game. Obviously, Texas versus Ohio State, 2 teams that are in the playoff this year, is going to be a very, very good game. So
just announced today, Garrett Nussmeier going to return for the 2025 season. Don't know who the Clemson quarterback is going to be there. Klubnik does have another year, though, right?
I think so.
I think he does. He redshirted first year under DJU, so he probably is going to be back in that quarterback or in that matchup as well. Moving on to week 2, Kansas goes on the road to Missouri for the first time since both of those teams were Big 12 opponents. Michigan at Oklahoma. My question in that football game, do we see Bryce Underwood for the first time in a national premier matchup? And then a little bit of an attempt to get, not necessarily revenge, but revenge for Virginia Tech as Vandy goes to Va Tech in week 2.
That's an interesting week. I think the Kansas-Missouri one, I don't think people are excited enough about that game. Like, that is a hate-filled rivalry that's been dormant for a decade now because of conference realignment. So
I wrote sleeper week next to that one already, week 2.
I like it.
Yeah,
That's a good claim.
Georgia's starting the slate with some real heaters. We'll get to that in the local hour. Let's go ahead and move on to week 3. Texas A&M goes on the road to Notre Dame. Georgia gets Tennessee early on in a September matchup. Earliest matchup those two teams have played since 1995. Florida at LSU week 3, and Wisconsin goes on the road to Tuscaloosa to give the finish and the culmination of that home and home between those 2 programs.
Playing Tennessee and Georgia in that early slate just feels right. For a while, I think the last few seasons, they've kind of been a late October, November game even. It's weird. Those 2 teams always seemed like that matchup just seems to feel better when it's in the first month or so of college football.
Yeah, I mean, that's how it was for a long time. Of Georgia and Tennessee played like end of September. They're one of the first conference opponents you typically had at the beginning of the year, and then it gets pushed back. So interesting now this year that's your first conference game. You got to go on the road. You're going to have a new quarterback. A lot of headlines around that matchup.
Absolutely. On to week number 4 of the SEC slate. Another sleep week. This is the get married weekend. This is the get married weekend of college football right here. Florida at Miami, Arkansas at Memphis, and you got a bunch of SEC versus Southeast, FCS Southeast. So go ahead, mark your calendars. Week 4 of the SEC slate. Go ahead and get hitched.
Shame
That's the one, huh?
Yep, that is the one. That is the go ahead, take your late, last summer vacation. Maybe you got a Florida lake trip or a beach trip planned for late September. That's the one to do it early October, week 4. Go ahead and get it in.
That's the conversation of if we had to pick a weekend, I'm okay. I could live with this one. We'll be
Facts.
all right.
I see the chat going ahead and using their creative minds to go ahead and start giving awards away to themselves and self-categorizing awards based off the title of tonight's show. I like that. I like what they're doing there.
Chat putting in work.
Chat putting in work, just like us. I appreciate that. Last show, best show from the chat as well. Shout out, chat. Chat, am I getting cooked? Shout out to the chat. We appreciate those guys for being here tonight. Week 4. Go ahead, get married. Go ahead, get out of town. Don't have to worry about college football. Unfortunately for us, I think that's the first bye week for Georgia.
It is.
Yes.
And we're going to have not jack shit to watch on television.
No, guys.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
We don't
This
know what the
happens
rest of the
every-
college football world looks like.
This happens every year where we say, man, there's no good games on. This week sucks.
Catch me watching a screen shaker at UMass week 4.
Notre Dame got Northern Illinois again?
Exactly.
On to week 5, it's a big one. Bama at Georgia, both off of a bye week for the second year in a row. Get these 2 premier programs getting a week off to prepare for one another.
First time since 2015 that Alabama will be making the trip to Sanford.
About damn time.
Notre Dame at Arkansas, week 5.
That's an interesting one. And you know what? Shout out to Notre Dame because we always give them shit for saying, oh, they don't schedule anyone now.
Yeah, congrats, Notre Dame. You scheduled the 10th best perennial SEC program.
But you know what?
I was gonna say Arkansas is not the hardest team to play. They did schedule Texas, to be fair. So,
but that's so smart by them. You have Texas A&M, so you already get like a true tough SEC game. And it's like, well, we got 2 SEC opponents. You guys claim that this is the kings of college football. We came to play them twice.
SEC titles amongst Notre Dame opponents in 2025, 0.
that's fair.
I do hope that Texas's strength of schedule is a little bit tougher next year, so we stop having to listen to non-SEC homers tell us, oh, the SEC must not be that hard. Texas year 1 ran through its regular season slate.
Well, I mean, hell, they're going to Ohio State in the first week. So.
I know. They're out of conference schedule next year, still solid. But the SEC slate this year was like, it gave everyone an opportunity to think that the SEC ain't what it is, and it was a fallacy.
Texas is just a really good football
No,
team.
Texas is definitely a really good football team, but it's not like they ran through the murderer's row of the SEC in the regular season. Okay, that was the only point. Week 6, Vandy, revenge game for Alabama. They go on the road. How about that, by the way, being a premier matchup? When they on their SEC network revealing the schedule, the first game they popped up in week 6, Vanderbilt on the road at Alabama. Dari Noka talking about it being a dynamic matchup.
Alyssa Lang dared to say it might be a rivalry. Might be the brewing of a rivalry right here.
Interesting.
Ooh.
I think week 6, spoiler alert, I got a top 5 games coming up. I think week 6 has got the best football game of the year. Of the year. In all of college football, my eyes will be transfixed on this one for 4 quarters.
You're looking at something that I don't know about then.
Texas at Florida.
That's
we
the
got,
best one.
I think it is for me, and here's why. I think there's a potential that we look back at Texas at Florida, Arch Manning versus DJ Lagway. I think 10 years from now, we look back at that matchup and we're like, dude, we got to watch that in college football. We got to watch these 2 quarterbacks go at it, as true sophomores, or it'd be a junior for Arch, but as sophomores in their second year starting, Arch first year starting. I think it's a massive matchup. I think it's a massive quarterback matchup. I think NFL scouts will be there in droves. I think it's a huge football game.
So you think this is like the 2016 Oklahoma versus Texas Tech game that everyone talks about?
No, I mean, that one everyone talks about because of the offensive style that Texas Tech ran and the team that Texas was and it being 2 versus 5.
No. Texas Tech versus Oklahoma. The Baker Mayfield.
Oh, Mahomes game. I thought you were going all the way back. Graham Harrell, Greg McElroy, or not? Excuse me, Colt McCoy. I thought you were going back. OG Mike Crabtree. I thought you were going there. That's where I thought you were going.
No. I'm talking.
That's
about
that catch, by the way.
Dick.
Yeah. But no, I think it's that big of a quarterback battle, and I'm intrigued by both of those football players. So yeah, week 6, I'm looking forward to it.
I think it could be like the equivalent of like a Deshaun Watson versus Lamar Jackson type thing.
Yes.
That game was 42-36. I mean, that game was absolutely electric between those 2.
There are 7 SEC teams on a bye in week 6.
Rest up, boys.
Week 7, however, week 7 about deep as an SEC slate can get. Oklahoma and Texas in the Red River. No bye week for the first time, I think, ever for those 2 football teams going into that one. Texas on the road at Florida. I think Oklahoma plays UTEP or something the week before at home. So slightly, not necessarily fair towards Texas there. Arkansas at Tennessee this weekend, or that weekend in week 7. Georgia at Auburn. Florida at Texas A&M. Bama at Missouri. South Carolina at LSU. It's a deep-ass week 7. Get a nice comfy seat and make sure you got the beer on ice.
Yeah, that's one of those games where it's like, I can't watch all these games. There's no way you can watch them all and consume them all. So that's a great problem to have.
Find me on the sideline of Georgia at Auburn with 2 phones, separate AirPods, and figuring out a way to shoot the game as well.
Did you say Kevin Gates lyric?
I like Kevin Gates.
Okay, J-Will. I'm impressed.
Y'all don't know about me. Y'all don't know me like that.
You don't know me like that.
This man's over here citing Kevin Gates.
I mean, 2 phones. I mean, my wife quoted that one the other day. It's not necessarily like a hip-hop connoisseur.
All right.
Damn, bro, let him have his moment.
One for the phone, or one for the load, one
You know, I was
for
searching
Didn't
for.
even get the
yeah,
lyric
yeah.
right.
What is it?
One for the plug, one for the low.
Low.
I was trying to find a good R&B concert to go to. Rod Wave, nowhere to be found.
Oh, that's what we're doing.
Yeah,
That's what we're
Let's
doing
have
tonight.
A music off between Brooks and Jay Will. I want to see this.
Yeah, with the no, please no.
Week 8, Tennessee at Alabama, third week in October. Ole Miss at Georgia, Oklahoma at South Carolina.
That's going to be a very interesting week, just because of the amount of kind of quote unquote rematch games. It's a rematch game for Alabama. You get them in Tuscaloosa. Obviously, Georgia gets a rematch against Ole Miss. Could be a redemption week for about, or it is a redemption.
I
week for
hope that Oklahoma is an improved football team next year
Yes.
because they're crucial to some of these games actually living up to the hype.
Yeah, we can't have another down year for Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Brett Venables, Brett can't either. On to week 9, Texas A&M at LSU, Bama at South Carolina, Missouri at Vanderbilt.
Get a couple headliners.
Get a couple. On to week 10, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina at Ole Miss, Oklahoma at Tennessee are the premier matchups that weekend.
Oklahoma is in all of these, man. They got a brutal schedule.
Yep. I think it's something like they finished with 7 or 8 SEC games in a row. All 7 are against teams who had winning records this year.
Tough.
And a couple of playoff opponents in there as well. Week 11, LSU at Bama. That's really it that week. Week 12, Texas at Georgia. Florida at Ole Miss. Week 13, Tennessee at Florida. Week 14, rivalry week. Really only turns out the Iron Bowl, Texas A&M at Texas.
It is interesting for as fierce of a conference as the SEC is. The rivalry week that you have isn't really that strong. Like, yes, there's the Iron Bowl.
Yeah.
Yes, we now have Texas A&M, Texas. But other than that, like, there's not a lot of interstate rivalries. Well, there are interstate rivalries, but there's not a lot of interconference rivalries that play off. Like, South Carolina plays Clemson, Georgia plays Georgia Tech, all the others. It's very interesting. Florida plays Florida State.
I don't know if I should take offense to this or what. Brooks looks like a state trooper who will talk football with you, and right when you think you're getting a warning, he walks back with his ticket book.
You should definitely take offense to that.
Yeah, man, that guy sucks. Top 5 games of the SEC season next year. You ready?
Yeah.
Let's hear 'em.
Now, some of these are non-conference football games,
Okay.
but here we go. Well, should we go 5 to 1 or 1 to 5? Let's build. 5 to 1. Bama at South Carolina. Ooh. Especially if it's a night game. You get that one at Willie B. Nighttime football game. Bama on the road. Don't know who their quarterback's going to be, but that's going to be a primetime matchup. I'm locked into Lenore Sellers next year. I hope they do a good enough job surrounding the rest of that roster with SEC caliber, high-quality football players. Number 4, Bama at Georgia. All the way down to number 4. Number 3, Texas at Georgia.
Valid.
Big-time football games. Number 2, Texas at Ohio State. And I've already spoiled my number 1 football game.
Interconference only.
Yes, I already spoiled my number 1 football game of next year. It's DJ versus Arch. It's Arch versus DJ. It's Texas on the road in the swamp. You don't think this one's going to live up, do you? Already. You're already sleeping on this matchup.
I'm not sleeping on it.
Shame on you.
Like, as far as it goes from the major cataclysmic matchups that will be taking place in the SEC this year, yeah, that one's going to be one we look back on with kind of like, wow, we got to watch 2 NFL quarterbacks battle it out. But do we think that Florida is going to be a playoff contender this year? Like, we're certain Texas will be, but I don't know. It just feels like looking at it from miles away, like Georgia, Texas is a bigger battle. South Carolina, Alabama, 2 teams that were this close to being in the playoff this year. Like, Florida was a 7-5 team this year. And as good as they are with DJ Lagwin, as much of an improvement as we expect them to make, like, I don't know if that's the matchup I'm most excited for right now sitting at this table.
Well, and it's very, very early on in this process, too. This is why I proposed a question. I think it was last week where do we really think that South Carolina and Florida are going to carry this hype into next year? Because I feel like we've been down this road for both of these programs before, and neither one of them actually ended up living up to it. I think that this time around, though, they actually have a base solidified within their programs. Both of them have 2 really good quarterbacks. Both of them have good young football players on both sides of the football. But it's a matter of getting everything put together and actually getting to that point in the season where that matchup does actually live up to the hype. I hope it does.
What's your favorite game?
Texas, Ohio State. That's a fun one. I like that one a lot. That's probably my number 1.
Grand clash of Texas and Ohio State is probably the best one.
Where's
But
that
I mean,
one
but
being
I mean,
played at?
like Georgia, Alabama,
Columbus.
Georgia,
Okay, so
Alabama,
Columbus.
and Sanford. Like this is probably a little
Yeah.
bias of me, but that's going to be a massive matchup.
So I guess Texas will play both of these Big Ten teams on the road and then play them both at home in sequential years,
You
I would
think
imagine. So interesting to see there, nonetheless. All right, we actually have some news to hit on you guys today. We got What If Wednesday. Bill Belichick unofficially headed to UNC. It's now a felony to embarrass Ryan Day in the state of Ohio. So watch out. A lot of people on that watch list. End of season awards hitting you guys tonight. Round 1 ticket prices, something to be noting there. Brian Hartline expressing interest in potentially leaving Ohio State. I felt it was worth noting tonight and talking about it. And I don't know if you guys know this, but there has been a playoff ticket already punched in 2025 for the playoffs of 2026. Do you know who it is?
Oregon.
Yeah, Oregon's already punched their ticket. Here's Oregon's 2025 slate, and we can end it right here. This is 12-0, winning their games by an average of 12 points per. Montana State, Oklahoma State, at Northwestern, Oregon State, at Penn State, Indiana, at Rutgers, Wisconsin, at Iowa, Minnesota, USC, at Washington. Guys, they're going to go their last 8 football games not having played a ranked opponent. They're going to play one ranked opponent potentially all year at Penn State. They got the Indiana shake of this thing. Oregon's already in the 2026 college football playoff. You can stamp it right now. Congratulations, Dan Lanning. Boys, when I read that schedule out, the only thing I can think of is we have got to figure out how to balance these conference schedules. We've got to. Because we've got teams just getting lotteries, schedule lotteries every so often. Just like, oh, we can just circle that one. We're going to be in the playoff that year. Ooh, we actually have to survive this year. We got a tough break.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you would do that because it's kind of predicting the team that's going to be good coming into the year. And I get that, like, there are some sure bets. Like, you can always assume Ohio State's going to be a good team. You can always kind of bet Penn State's going to be a really good team. But, I mean, a lot of these other teams, like, it's very hard to tell. Like, if you come into the 2024 season and thought, okay, we get to play Vanderbilt, South Carolina, and Kentucky. Kentucky might be a tough matchup. You know how Mark Stoops' teams are. Kentucky would have been the easiest gimme out of those 3 games. So it's just like you can't really predict it. And I mean, I guarantee that when we get into the thick of the schedule, it's certainly a favorable schedule.
Okay.
I'd be shocked if they
Sorry to cut you off. UNC football has officially tweeted out that they've hired Bill Belichick. So that is official, and we'll get to that in just a second.
Chapel Bill.